The alarm bells screamed through the small exploration ship as it shook violently. 8-year-old Nari Kim pressed her face against the porthole window, watching bright flashes of light tear through the purple clouds of the Keth Nebula. Her parents were shouting something from the bridge, but she could not hear them over the terrible noise. "Nari, get to the escape pod now!" her father Day yelled as he ran past her. His face was covered in sweat and his hands were shaking. "The engine is going to explode. We have maybe 2 minutes." Nari had practiced this drill many times, but never when the ship was spinning like a broken toy. She grabbed her small backpack from her cabin and stumbled toward the escape pods. The floor kept moving under her feet, and she had to hold on to the walls to stay standing. Her mother Sumi was already at the pod bay, typing quickly on a control panel. "The main pod is damaged," she said in a scared voice. "Nari will have to take the small one alone." "No," Day said firmly. "She is too young. We all go together or nobody goes." "Look at the readings." Sumi pointed to the red numbers on the screen. "The small pod can only hold one person safely. If we try to fit all 3 of us, none of us will survive the crash." Nari looked at her parents. She had never seen them so frightened before. Her father always told jokes and her mother always sang while she worked. Now they just looked scared and sad. "I can do it," Nari said quietly. "You taught me how to use the emergency systems. I remember everything." Sumi knelt down and hugged her daughter tight. "The pod will take you to the nearest safe planet. The rescue ships will find you in a few days. Just stay near the pod and wait for help." Day handed her a survival kit and helped her into the small pod. "Remember what we taught you about alien plants and animals. Do not eat anything you do not recognize. Do not go near anything that looks dangerous." The ship shook again, harder this time. Sparks flew from the ceiling and the lights flickered. "I love you both," Nari said as the pod door began to close. "We love you too, little star," Sumi said with tears in her eyes. "Be brave and be smart. We will find you soon." The pod launched just as the exploration ship exploded behind them. Nari watched through the small window as pieces of her home scattered into the purple mist. She did not cry yet. There would be time for crying later. The pod flew through space for what felt like hours. Nari tried to stay awake, but the gentle humming of the engines made her sleepy. She closed her eyes and dreamed of her parents finding her and taking her home. She woke up when the pod started shaking again. Through the window, she could see a large planet covered in dark red and black colors. It looked nothing like the green and blue worlds she had seen in her school books. "Warning," the pod computer said in a calm voice. "Approaching Vorthak Prime. This planet is marked as extremely dangerous. All Galactic Council ships are forbidden from landing here." Nari frowned. She had heard that name before in her Alien by Studies class. Vorthak Prime was where the scary Vorthaki lived. Her teacher had shown pictures of them once. They were huge creatures with 6 arms and sharp teeth that could cut through metal. "Computer, can we go to a different planet?" she asked. "Negative. Fuel reserves at 0%. Emergency landing required." The pod crashed through thick trees and bounced across rocky ground before finally stopping in a small clearing. Nari's head hurt, and her arm was bleeding a little, but she was alive. She opened the pod door and stepped outside. The air was thick and hot, and everything smelled like sulfur and rotting plants. Strange purple flowers grew everywhere, and the trees had black bark that seemed to move in the wind. In the distance, she could hear deep roaring sounds that made her stomach feel cold with fear. Nari remembered her parents' words about staying near the pod. She set up the emergency beacon and opened her survival kit. Inside were water purification tablets, emergency food bars, a first aid kit, and a small device that could translate basic alien languages. She had been on the planet for 2 days when she heard the crying. It was coming from behind a cluster of sharp rocks about 50 meters from her pod. The sound was high and sad, like a puppy in pain. Nari knew she should stay where she was, but the crying made her heart hurt. She took her first aid kit and walked carefully toward the sound. Behind the rocks, she found a small creature about, the size of a dog. It had 6 limbs like the adult Vorthaki, but its skin was softer and lighter in color. One of its arms was bent at a wrong angle, and dark blue blood was seeping from several cuts. The young Vorthaki looked up at her with large, yellow eyes. It made a soft whimpering sound and tried to crawl away, but it was too hurt to move far. Nari had helped her mother treat injured animals on their farm back on Earth. She knew what broken bones looked like, and she knew how to clean wounds and make bandages. "It is okay," she said softly, even though she knew the creature probably could not understand her. "I want to help you." She opened her first aid kit and began cleaning the wounds with antiseptic wipes. The young Vorthaki was scared at first, but it seemed to understand that she was trying to help. It held very still while she worked. Nari used the emergency splint from her kit to set the broken arm. She wrapped clean bandages around the wounds and gave the creature some of her precious water to drink. The whole time, she spoke quietly and gently, the same way her mother talked to frightened animals. When she was finished, the young Vorthaki made a soft purring sound and touched her hand gently with one of its good arms. That was when she heard the heavy footsteps behind her. Nari turned around slowly and found herself looking up at the largest creature she had ever seen. The adult Vorthaki was over 3 meters tall, with muscles like twisted steel cables and teeth the size of kitchen knives. Its 6 arms ended in claws that could probably tear her apart without much effort. The creature was looking down at her and the injured youngling. Its yellow eyes were impossible to read, but Nari could feel the intelligence behind them. This was not just a wild animal. This was something that could think and plan and make decisions. Nari stood up slowly, keeping her hands where the creature could see them. She pointed to the bandaged youngling and then to her first aid kit. "I helped," she said simply. The adult Vorthaki tilted its massive head and made a low, rumbling sound. Then it did something that surprised her completely. It sat down. The creature was still huge even while sitting, but it no longer seemed quite so scary. It reached out with one arm and gently touched the bandages Nari had applied to the youngling. Then it looked at her again, and this time she thought she saw something like curiosity in its yellow eyes. More footsteps echoed through the forest around them. Nari realized that this adult was not alone. She could see shadows moving between the trees, and she could smell the strong scent of more Vorthaki. She was surrounded by a pack of the galaxy's most feared predators, and somehow she was not afraid anymore. The adult Vorthaki made a series of clicks and growls, and the injured youngling responded with similar sounds. Nari activated her translation device, but it could only pick up a few words. Small one, healing, and pack. As the sun began to set over the dangerous planet, Nari Kim realized that her rescue might be a very long time coming. But as the adult Vorthaki carefully lifted its injured youngling and gestured for her to follow, she also realized that she might not be in as much danger as everyone thought. Maybe, just maybe, she had found a new kind of family among the stars. The Vorthaki pack leader was called Grex. Nari learned his name on her 3rd day with the pack when she heard the others growling it respectfully. He was the biggest of all the creatures, with scars covering his dark skin and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Grex watched Nari constantly, but not in a way that made her feel scared. It was more like the way her father used to watch her when she was learning to ride her bike. Careful and ready to help, but letting her try things on her own. The pack had made a temporary camp in a cave system near where Nari had crashed. The injured youngling, who she had started calling Pip in her head, was getting better each day. Nari changed his bandages every morning and evening, and the other Vorthaki would gather around to watch her work. On the fourth day, a loud argument broke out between Grex and another large Vorthaki. This one had darker skin and longer claws than the others. Nari's translation device caught some of the words they were using: dangerous, weak, tradition, and kill. The second Vorthaki, who the others called Thork, kept pointing at Nari and making angry sounds. His body language reminded her of the aggressive dogs she had seen at the animal shelter back home. He was trying to make himself look bigger and more threatening, but there was an older female Vorthaki who seemed to disagree with Thork. She was smaller than the males, but carried herself with quiet confidence. When she spoke, even Grex listened carefully. Her name was Kess, and she had been watching Nari with great interest. The argument continued for most of the day. Nari could not understand most of what they were saying, but she could tell it was about her. Some of the pack wanted her gone, but others seemed to want her to stay. That evening, Kess approached Nari while she was sharing her dinner with Pip. The old female sat down nearby and made soft clicking sounds. She pointed to herself and said, "Kess," clearly, then pointed to Nari with a questioning sound. "Nari," the girl said, pointing to herself. Kess repeated her name several times, then began to speak slowly in her own language. Nari's translator could only catch pieces, but Kess seemed to be asking about her family and where she came from. Nari tried to explain using simple words and hand gestures. She pointed up at the sky and made flying motions with her hands. She showed Kess the pictures of her parents on her emergency device. Then she made sad faces and pointed to her crashed pod. Kess nodded thoughtfully. She seemed to understand that Nari was alone and far from home. The old female made comforting sounds and gently touched Nari's shoulder with one of her smaller arms. Over the next few days, Nari began to learn more about pack life. The Vorthaki had a complex social structure that reminded her of the wolf, documentaries she used to watch. Grex was the alpha, but he listened to advice from Kess and other experienced pack members. Thork was the beta, which meant he was second in command, but also the most likely to challenge Grex for leadership. Nari quickly figured out how to move around the pack without causing trouble. She always approached Grex first when she wanted to go somewhere or do something new. She made sure to show respect to Kess and the other older members, and she stayed out of Thork's way when he was in a bad mood. But it was her behavior around the pack's younglings that really caught their attention. Besides Pip, there were 3 other young Vorthaki in the group. They were bigger and stronger than Pip, but they were still learning how to hunt and fight. The younglings were naturally curious about Nari. They would sniff her and make questioning sounds. Some of the adult pack members got nervous when their children got too close to the strange human, but Nari always stayed calm and gentle. She shared her food with any youngling that approached her. She let them examine her belongings and even her strange, smooth skin. When one of the young ones got scared by a loud noise in the forest, Nari instinctively moved to comfort it, making soothing sounds and offering protection even though she was smaller and weaker than the creature she was trying to protect. This behavior confused the adult Vorthaki. In their society, only pack members protected each other's young. Outsiders were threats to be driven away or killed. But here was this tiny alien creature acting like she belonged to their pack. Kess began spending more time with Nari, teaching her basic Vorthaki words and gestures. The old female seemed fascinated by how quickly Nari learned their body language and social rules. Most alien species that encountered Vorthaki either ran away screaming or tried to fight. Nari did neither. She simply adapted. The test came on Nari's 8th day with the pack. They were all resting in the afternoon heat when the sentries started making alarm calls. Another pack of Vorthaki was approaching their territory, and from the sounds they were making, they were not coming for a friendly visit. Grex immediately began organizing his pack for defense. The adult males took positions around the camp perimeter, while the females gathered the younglings into the safest part of the cave system. Thork grabbed Nari roughly and started dragging her toward the back of the caves. "Hide the weakness," he growled in broken galactic standard, the common language most species used for basic communication. But Nari pulled away from him. She had spotted something the adult Vorthaki had missed. From her position near the cave entrance, she could see movement in the trees that the sentries could not see from their higher positions. The attacking pack was not coming from the direction everyone expected. They were circling around to attack. From behind, Nari ran to Grex and tugged on his arm, pointing toward the trees where she had seen the movement. At first, he did not understand what she was trying to tell him, but when she started drawing pictures in the dirt and using hand signals to show the enemy's real position, his eyes widened with understanding. Grex let out a series of quick barks that sent half his warriors racing toward the rear of their territory. They arrived just in time to intercept the attacking pack's surprise assault. The battle was fierce, but short. With their ambush ruined, the attacking pack found themselves caught between two groups of defenders. They retreated quickly, leaving behind only the scent of their fear and anger. After the fight was over, Grex approached Nari with something like wonder in his yellow eyes. He spoke slowly in galactic standard, clearly struggling with the unfamiliar language. "Small humans see what pack warriors miss," he said carefully. "Small humans save pack from defeat." Thork was not happy about this development. He argued loudly with Grex, but the pack leader stood firm. Nari had proved her worth to the pack, and that meant something important in Vorthaki culture. That night, Kes performed a simple ceremony. She painted Nari's forehead with a mixture of clay and plant, juice that would mark her as a protected member of the pack. It was not a full adoption, but it was recognition that she belonged with them. As Nari fell asleep that night, surrounded by the warm bodies of alien predators who had accepted her as one of their own, she wondered what her parents would think, if they could see her now. She was still hoping they would find her soon. But for the first time since the crash, she was not afraid of being alone. She had found a new family among the stars, and they would keep her safe until her old family could bring her home. Thork still watched her with suspicious eyes, but even he could not argue with results. The small human had saved their lives, and in the harsh world of Vorthak Prime, that kind of contribution earned respect even from the most stubborn pack members. Grex had made his decision. The human youngling would stay with the pack, and anyone who wanted to change that would have to challenge him directly. In the dangerous territory of the galaxy's most feared predators, 8-year-old Nari Kim had found her place. 3 months had passed since Nari crashed on Vorthak Prime. The rescue ships her parents had promised never came. Every morning, she checked her emergency beacon, but it showed no incoming signals. The galaxy was vast, and finding one small girl on a forbidden planet was nearly impossible, but Nari was no longer the scared child who had stumbled out of a broken escape pod. She had learned to move like a Vorthaki, silent and aware of everything around her. Her skin was darker from the alien sun, and her muscles were stronger from keeping up with creatures twice her size. The pack had accepted her completely now. Even Thork treated her with grudging respect, though he still muttered about unnatural bonds when he thought no one was listening. It was Vex who became her closest friend and teacher. He was young for an adult Vorthaki, only recently earned his hunting rights. His curiosity about the strange human matched her curiosity about his people. "Today, you learn to track," Vex announced one morning, speaking in the mixture of Vorthaki and galactic standard that had become their common language. Nari had been waiting for this day. She had watched the hunting parties leave and return many times, but she had never been allowed to go with them. Grex had always said she was too small and too slow. Grex said yes? She asked hopefully. Vex made the Vorthaki gesture for amusement, a quick flick of his smallest arms. Grex said teach small human to find food, not to hunt big prey. But Vex thinks small human has surprises. They started in the forest near the cave, looking for traces of the six-legged herbivores that the Vorthaki called ground runners. These animals were fast and clever, but they were not dangerous. Vex showed Nari how to read the signs. Broken twigs meant something had passed through recently. Certain scents meant the animals were nearby. Disturbed earth showed which direction they were traveling, but Nari saw things that Vex missed. While he looked for obvious signs, she noticed patterns in how the animals moved. She could predict where they would go next by understanding their behavior. Ground runners always look for water in the hot part of the day, she explained to Vex as they followed a trail. But they do not drink from the same place twice in a row. They remember dangers. Vex was impressed. How does small human know this? Nari thought about it. All animals are similar in some ways. They want food, water, and safety. If you understand what they need, you can understand where they go. This way of thinking was new to the Vorthaki. They were powerful hunters who used strength and speed to catch their prey. But Nari's approach used patience and understanding instead of force. When they found the ground runner herd, Nari suggested something that surprised Vex even more. We should not catch them today, she said quietly. We should watch them and learn their patterns. Then tomorrow we can catch 2 instead of 1, and we will know where to find them again next week. This kind of long-term thinking was not common. Among Vorthaki hunters, they usually took what they could when they found it. But Nari was thinking like a human farmer, planning for the future instead of just reacting to the present. Vex decided to try her way. They spent the rest of the day watching the herd from hiding, learning their habits and routines. Nari made marks in the dirt to remember important information about water sources, feeding areas, and safe sleeping spots. The next day, they returned with a detailed plan. Nari had figured out that the ground runners had 3 different paths they used to reach water. By positioning themselves at the right intersection, they could catch animals coming from any direction. The hunt was the most successful Vex had ever experienced. They caught 3 ground runners with less effort than it usually took to catch 1. Even better, they knew exactly where the rest of the herd had gone, so they could hunt again tomorrow if needed. When they returned to the cave, the other hunters gathered around to hear about their success. Nari tried to explain her methods, but many of the older Vorthaki looked confused. Small human thinks too much, complained one of the veterans. Hunting is about strength and speed, not sitting and watching. But Grex was interested. The pack leader had been hunting for many years, and he understood the value of better strategies. Show the pack, he commanded Nari. Teach us your thinking methods. Over the following weeks, Nari began working with different hunting groups. She could not match their physical abilities, but her tactical mind made every hunt more successful. She taught them about persistence hunting, the human technique of following prey until it became too tired to run. The Vorthaki were amazed that such a simple idea could be so effective. She showed them how to use teamwork in new ways. Instead of just surrounding prey, they could use coordinated movements to guide animals into traps or dead ends. Most importantly, she taught them to think like their prey. Understanding what animals wanted and feared made predicting their behavior much easier. The pack's hunting success rate doubled in just 1 month. They were bringing in more food with less risk and effort. Even the skeptical veterans had to admit that the small human's methods worked. But it was not just hunting where Nari made a difference. She also changed how the pack thought about cooperation and planning. When the dry season came and water became scarce, Nari suggested rationing their stored food and water instead of consuming everything immediately. This was difficult for the Vorthaki to understand at first, but it helped them survive when other packs were struggling. She taught the younglings to make simple tools from rocks and sticks. The adult Vorthaki had always used only their natural weapons, but they began to see the value of extending their reach and leverage. She even helped resolve disputes within the pack by suggesting compromise solutions that satisfied both sides. Her human perspective often revealed options that the Vorthaki had not considered. Thork remained suspicious of these changes, but he could not argue with the results. The pack was stronger, better fed, and more unified than it had ever been. The Sao. Small human changes too much too fast, he warned Grex one evening. This is not the Vorthaki way. Grex considered this carefully. Change was always dangerous, but so was refusing to adapt when adaptation brought clear benefits. The Vorthaki way is to survive and grow strong, he replied finally. If small humans' methods make the pack stronger, then they become Vorthaki methods. As the seasons changed on the dangerous planet, Nari continued to grow and learn. She was no longer just surviving among the predators. She was helping them become better predators themselves. The galaxy's most feared hunters were learning from a human child, and both species were becoming something new in the process. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, rescue ships continued to search for her. But on Vorthak Prime, Nari Kim was no longer waiting to be saved. She was busy teaching apex predators that cooperation was more powerful than competition, and that sometimes the smallest pack member could have the biggest impact. Vorthaki were discovering that humans brought more than just tactical advantages. They brought a completely different way of seeing the universe, one that valued planning, empathy, and long-term thinking over pure instinct and aggression. And in the dangerous territory where only the strongest survived, those human qualities were proving to be the ultimate evolutionary advantage. Captain Hyun of the Galactic Council rescue ship Mercy's Light stared at his scanner readings in disbelief. After 6 months of searching, they had finally detected Nari Kim's emergency beacon. But the readings made no sense. Run the scan again, he ordered his communications officer. Sir, I have run it 12 times. Replied Lieutenant Jin. The beacon is definitely there, but it is surrounded by massive life forms. The computer identifies them as Vorthaki signatures. Captain Hyun felt. His blood turned cold. Every spacefarer knew about the Vorthaki. They were death incarnate, the nightmares that kept even veteran soldiers awake at night. No one survived contact with a Vorthaki pack. How many are we detecting? He asked quietly. 17 adults, sir, plus several smaller signatures that might be juveniles. Captain Hyun had been hoping to find survivors, or at least remains to return to the girl's family. He had not expected to find evidence of the largest Vorthaki pack ever recorded. Could the beacon have been taken from the crash site? He wondered aloud. Possible, sir, but the signal has been stationary for weeks. If they took it as a trophy, they would probably have moved it by now. The captain made a decision that went against every regulation in the book. Take us into orbit. We need to see what is down there. The Mercy's Light approached Vorthak Prime carefully, using stealth systems to avoid detection. Through their long-range cameras, they could see the Vorthaki pack moving through the forest below. What they saw challenged everything they thought they knew about these creatures. The Vorthaki were not behaving like mindless predators. They moved in organized formations, used complex communication signals, and seemed to be following carefully planned routes. But most shocking of all, there was a small figure moving with them. Enhance Sector 7, Captain Hyun commanded, his voice tight with tension. The image zoomed in, and the bridge crew gasped. A young human girl was walking alongside the massive predators, talking to them as if they were her family pets. She showed no fear, no distress. In fact, she seemed to be giving them instructions. That is impossible, whispered Jin. Humans cannot survive among Vorthaki. They eat anything that moves. But the evidence was right in front of them. Not only was Nari Kim alive, she appeared to be thriving. She was taller than when she had disappeared, her skin was healthy, and her movements showed confidence and strength. More disturbing were the Vorthaki themselves. They seemed to be protecting her, arranging themselves so that she was always in the center of their formation. When she stopped to examine something, they stopped too. When she pointed in a direction, they followed. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "I am detecting tool use among the Vorthaki. They appear to be carrying shaped sticks and stones." "Vorthaki do not use tools," Captain Hyun said automatically. "These ones do, sir." For 3 days, the rescue ship observed from orbit. The more they watched, the more confused they became. The human child was not a prisoner or a pet. She was clearly an integral part of the pack's social structure. They watched her teach young Vorthaki to make simple implements. They saw her settle disputes between adults with gestures and sounds. Most incredibly, they observed her leading, hunting strategies that were far more sophisticated than anything in the xenobiological literature. "We need to make contact," Captain Hyun finally decided. "Prepare a shuttle. Small crew, minimal weapons." "Sir, with respect, that is suicide," protested his first officer. 17 Vorthaki will tear us apart before we can even deploy." "Maybe," the captain agreed, "but that little girl is a human citizen, and it is our duty to bring her home. Besides, if she can survive among them for 6 months, maybe they are not as mindlessly aggressive as we thought." The shuttle landed in a clearing near the Vorthaki camp. Captain Hyun, Dr. Min, and Security Chief Park stepped out cautiously, their hands visible and empty of weapons. The response was immediate. Vorthaki warriors emerged from the forest, surrounding the shuttle with practiced efficiency. Their movements were coordinated and purposeful, nothing like the wild animal behavior described in military reports. But it was the pack leader who shocked them most. The massive Vorthaki approached them directly, looked Captain Hyun in the eyes, and spoke in clear galactic standard. "You come for the small human," Grek said calmly. "She does not wish to leave." Before Captain Hyun could respond, Nari herself appeared from behind the pack leader. She looked healthy and happy, dressed in clothes made from local materials, but carrying herself with quiet confidence. "Hello," she said politely. "Are you here to take me home?" "Yes, child," Captain Hyun managed to say. "Your parents sent us to find you. They have been very worried." Nari's face brightened with joy. "My parents are alive? I thought their ship exploded." "They escaped in the main pod," Dr. Min explained gently. "They have been searching for you ever since." The girl's happiness was obvious, but then her expression became more complex. She looked back at the Vorthaki pack, then at the rescue team. "I want to see my parents again," she said carefully. "But I cannot just leave my pack. They are my family too now." "Pack?" Captain Hyun repeated, confused. Grek stepped forward again. "Small human is pack sister," he explained in his careful galactic standard. "She teaches hunting wisdom. She heals injured. She settles disputes. Pack is stronger with her. She protects our young as if they were her own offspring," added Kess, who had learned enough galactic standard to participate in the conversation. "We protect her the same way." Security Chief Park was staring at the scene in amazement. "Sir, I am reading no aggressive intentions from any of these creatures. Their body language suggests they consider us guests, not threats." "That is because Nari taught us about different types of visitors," explained Vex, appearing beside his human friend. "Some come to learn, some come to help, some come to take. We watch behavior to know which type." Captain Hyun felt like his understanding of the universe was crumbling. Everything the Galactic Council knew about Vorthaki was apparently wrong. These were not mindless monsters. They were intelligent, social creatures with complex emotions and behaviors. "The child needs to come with us," he said, though less firmly than before. "Her parents need to know she is safe." "Yes," Grex agreed. "But small human returns to pack when ready. This is her territory now. These are her hunting grounds." Nari stepped forward. "Could I talk to my parents first? Maybe they could come here to see how I live now?" The idea of bringing civilian humans to Vorthak Prime seemed insane, but Captain Hyun found himself considering it. If this child had survived here for 6 months, maybe it was not as impossible as everyone thought. "I will need to discuss this with my superiors," he said slowly. "This situation is unprecedented." "Take pictures," Nari suggested. "Show them I am safe and happy. Show them my pack family. Maybe they will understand." As they prepared to leave, the Vorthaki pack gathered around Nari for what was clearly an emotional farewell. The massive predators touched her gently with their smaller arms, made soft sounds of comfort, and promised to wait for her return. Thork, who had been watching from a distance, finally approached. "Small human changes everything," he said gruffly. "Thork does not like change, but Pack is stronger now, safer, better hunters." He paused, then added reluctantly, "Thork will miss small human wisdom." As the shuttle lifted off, Captain Hyun looked down at the Vorthaki pack. They stood in formation, watching their human pack sister leave, their body language expressing what could only be described as sadness. "Sir," asked Dr. Min, "what do we tell the council?" Captain Hyun thought about it for a long moment. "We tell them the truth, that we found a human child who has accomplished something that centuries of diplomacy could not. She has made friends with the galaxy's most feared predators. And if they do not believe us?" The captain looked at the recordings they had made, showing Nari teaching, healing, and leading among creatures that were supposed to be incapable of such cooperation. "Then we show them the evidence," he said quietly. "Because this changes everything we thought we knew about both humans and Vorthaki." In the shuttle, Nari pressed her face to the window, watching her adopted homeworld disappear behind them. She was excited to see her parents again, but part of her heart remained on the surface below with her pack family. She had no idea that her unique situation was about to reshape galactic politics forever. The reunion between Nari and her parents took place aboard the medical station Hope's End in neutral space. Dae and Sumi Kim had aged years in the 6 months since losing their daughter, but their joy at seeing her alive and healthy was overwhelming. "Little star," Sumi whispered, holding Nari close. "We never stopped looking for you." "I knew you would find me," Nari replied, though her voice carried new maturity that surprised her parents. "The pack always said human families never abandon their young." "Pack?" Dae asked, noticing his daughter's casual reference to the creatures that had supposedly held her captive. Dr. Bora Park, the xenobiologist assigned to study Nari's case, stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Kim, your daughter's situation is quite remarkable. We need to discuss some unusual developments." Over the following days, Dr. Park conducted extensive interviews with Nari, while her parents watched through observation windows. What they learned challenged every assumption about human-alien relations. "Tell me about your daily routine with the Vorthaki," Dr. Park requested during one session. Nari settled into her chair, clearly comfortable discussing her experiences. Morning hunt planning with Grex and the senior hunters, teaching sessions with the younglings after the noon rest. Healing duties in the evening if anyone was injured, pack bonding time before sleep. Pack bonding? Grooming, sharing food, telling stories about the day's events, normal family activities. Dr. Park made notes frantically. "And you never felt like a prisoner or pet?" Nari looked genuinely confused by the question. "Why would I? I had duties and responsibilities just like every other pack member. I earned my food through contribution, not charity. But surely you missed human contact, human culture." "Of course," Nari admitted. "But the pack understood that. Grex made sure I could keep some human customs. I taught them human songs and they learned to appreciate different types of thinking." Through the observation window, Dae and Sumi watched their daughter with mixed emotions. She was clearly their child, but she had also become something new. her posture, her way of moving. Even her facial expressions had been influenced by months among apex predators. She shows no trauma symptoms, Dr. Park explained to them later. No fear responses, no anxiety about her experiences. If anything, she appears more confident and emotionally stable than before. But she was living with monsters, Sumi protested. How could that not affect her? That is what we need to understand, Dr. Park replied. Because your daughter may have discovered something about human nature that we never realized. The breakthrough came when Dr. Park showed Nari recordings of other predator species from across the galaxy. The girl's reactions were immediate and intense. The Drakari hunt in family groups too, Nari observed, watching footage of the dragon-like creatures. But they are competing with each other instead of cooperating. That is why they are less successful than they could be. How can you tell that just from watching them? Body language, territorial spacing, resource competition. They have the same pack instincts as the Vorthaki, but they have not learned to channel them properly. Dr. Park felt a chill run down her spine. Nari, do you think you could help the Drakari like you helped the Vorthaki? The girl considered this seriously. Maybe. Every species has different needs, but the basic principles of cooperation are universal. Pack bonding is not unique to any one race. That evening, Dr. Park sent an urgent message to the Galactic Council. Her preliminary findings were disturbing and revolutionary in equal measure. Subject displays unprecedented ability to integrate with apex predator social structures, she wrote. More significantly, she appears to instinctively understand pack dynamics across multiple species. This suggests that human pack bonding abilities may be far more powerful and universal than previously understood. The response came quickly. Elder Zeph of the Drakari Confederation requested immediate audience with the human child. The Krellin hive mind sent diplomatic inquiries. Even the isolationist Void Stalkers expressed interest in these findings. What does this mean? Day asked Dr. Park during a private consultation. It means your daughter has accidentally demonstrated that humans possess what might be the most valuable diplomatic ability in the galaxy, she replied. The power to form genuine emotional bonds with any intelligent species. That does not sound dangerous. Mr. Kim, in the wrong hands, this ability could reshape galactic power structures overnight. If humans can bond with and influence apex predators the way Nari has, we are not just another spacefaring species. We become the ultimate alliance builders. The implications hit home when Elder Zeph arrived at the station. The Drakari was massive even by predator standards, with scales like metal armor and eyes that burned like stars. His species had been locked in territorial wars for centuries, too proud and aggressive to form lasting partnerships. He took one look at Nari and something in his expression shifted. "Small human," he rumbled in accented galactic standard. "You have done what philosophers said was impossible. You made pact with the Vorthaki." It was not hard, Nari replied honestly. They just needed someone to show them that cooperation was stronger than competition. "Show me," Zeph commanded, but his tone was respectful rather than demanding. What happened next would be recorded in galactic history. Over 3 days, 9-year-old Nari Kim calmly explained to one of the most feared creatures in known space why his people's constant warfare was holding them back. She drew diagrams showing how Drakari territory could be organized more efficiently. She suggested resource-sharing agreements that would benefit all parties. Most importantly, she helped Zeph understand that strength came not from defeating rivals, but from making them into allies. "Your thermal breath weapon," she told him during one session, "is perfect for clearing forest lands for agriculture. Instead of using it to burn enemy territories, you could use it to help other species create farmland. Then they would owe you food shares instead of planning revenge." Zeph listened with growing amazement. The small human was describing strategies that could end millennia of conflict while making his people stronger than ever. "The Vorthaki teach you this wisdom?" he asked. "No," Nari replied. This is just how humans think. We see potential friends instead of automatic enemies. By the end of the week, Elder Zeph had formally requested a human diplomatic mission to the Drakari homeworld. 3 other predator species had made similar requests. The galactic balance of power was shifting, and it was all because one little girl had refused to see monsters where others saw only death. We need to be very careful about how we proceed, Dr. Park warned the Galactic Council. Nari's abilities appear to be natural human traits, not unique gifts. If other humans can replicate her results, we are looking at a fundamental change in how the galaxy operates. Admiral Tay of the human colonial fleet was both excited and concerned by these developments. Are you saying that any human could potentially bond with predator species? That is exactly what I am saying, Dr. Park confirmed. But it requires specific psychological traits: empathy, patience, the ability to see situations from non-human perspectives, and most importantly, the willingness to become part of something larger than yourself. Pack bonding instincts, Admiral Tay mused. We always knew humans were social creatures, but we never realized how far that extended. Sir, if we can train human diplomats to replicate Nari's methods, we could broker peace between species that have been at war for centuries. We could create alliances that were previously impossible. But even as the possibilities excited them, darker implications emerged. If humans could bond with and influence the galaxy's apex predators, what did that mean for existing power structures? How would other species react when they realized that humanity possessed this unprecedented diplomatic advantage? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. Reports began flooding in from across the galaxy, predator species abandoning traditional territories to seek contact with human settlements, ancient enemies requesting human mediators, and most alarming of all, several apex predator races beginning to coordinate their activities for the first time in galactic history. The pack is forming, Nari observed when Dr. Park showed her the reports. The big pack, with humans as the connectors between different hunting groups. Is that good or bad? Dr. Park asked nervously. Nari considered the question with the seriousness of someone far older than her years. That depends on what the pack decides to hunt. The galaxy held its breath, watching as humanity's greatest strength began to reshape the cosmic order. And at the center of it all was a 9-year-old girl who had simply tried to help an injured alien child and ended up changing everything. 2 years had passed since Nari Kim's rescue from Vorthak Prime. She was 11 years old now, taller and more confident, but she still carried herself with the quiet awareness she had learned from her adopted pack. The galaxy was a very different place than it had been when she first crashed on that dangerous world. The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species gathered for an emergency session. At the center of the debate was something no one had ever imagined possible: a formal alliance between humanity and 7 of the galaxy's most feared predator races. "This is madness," declared Ambassador Koth of the Centauri Republic. "Predator species do not form alliances. They compete and destroy each other. It is their nature." "Their nature has changed," replied Admiral Tay calmly, "or perhaps we simply misunderstood it from the beginning." On the great viewing screen, the evidence was undeniable. Vorthaki warriors trained alongside Drakari fire-breathers in joint military exercises. Krellin hive ships coordinated with human vessels in perfect formation. The Voidstalkers, who had not spoken to any other species for 3 centuries, now served as scouts and intelligence gatherers for the growing alliance. "How did this happen so quickly?" demanded the Altarian Trade Minister. 2 years ago, these species would not even acknowledge each other's existence. Dr. Bora Park stepped forward to address the council. She had become the leading expert on what the scientific community now called human pack dynamics. The process began with individual human ambassadors working with each species separately, she explained. "We used Nari Kim's methods: patience, empathy, and the willingness to become part of their social structures rather than trying to impose our own. But the scale of cooperation we are seeing goes far beyond simple diplomacy, protested the Andromedan representative. These predators are sharing territory, resources, even military technology. That level of trust should be impossible. It would be impossible, Dr. Park agreed, if they were still thinking like separate competing species. But they are not. They now think of themselves as part of a larger pack, with humans serving as the connecting element between different hunting specializations. The implications terrified many of the traditional galactic powers. For centuries, the balance of power had depended on predator species being too aggressive and territorial to work together. Now that balance was crumbling. "What do they want?" asked Elder Voran of the Peaceful Trade Coalition, his voice tight, with worry. Admiral Tay considered the question carefully. "The same thing any pack wants: security for their members, territory to hunt in, and the right to raise their young without interference. And if other species threaten those goals, then they will respond as a unified pack rather than as separate competitors." The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by an announcement that sent shockwaves through the chamber. Nari Kim herself had requested permission to address the council. She entered the Great Hall accompanied by an honor guard that would have been impossible to imagine 3 years earlier. Grex walked beside her, his massive frame somehow managing to look both protective and respectful. Behind them came representatives from each of the allied predator species, moving in perfect coordination. Nari approached the central podium with the calm confidence of someone who had learned to speak for entire civilizations. She was no longer the lost child who had crashed on a forbidden planet. She had become something new, the first human to truly understand what her species was capable of. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "I know you are afraid of what you see happening across the galaxy. Change is always frightening, especially when it involves species you have learned to fear." Murmurs rippled through the assembly as they watched this young human address, them with the authority of someone much older. "But the predator species are not your enemies unless you make them so. They are hunters, yes, but hunters can be protectors too. It all depends on who they consider part of their pack." Elder Zeph of the Drakari stepped forward. The massive creature's presence dominated the chamber, but his voice was respectful when he spoke. "Small Alpha speaks truth," he rumbled. "Drakari learn new hunting from humans, not hunting for territory or dominance, hunting for cooperation and mutual strength." "The Vorthaki concept of pack has expanded," added Grex in his careful galactic standard. "Pack now includes many species, many types of hunters. All contribute different skills. All benefit from shared strength." Ambassador Koth stood up, his face flushed with anger and fear. "You speak of cooperation, but what we see is intimidation. 7 predator species moving in coordination, sharing military technology, establishing joint territories. How long before you decide the rest of us are prey?" The chamber fell silent. This was the question everyone was thinking, but few dared to ask. Nari looked directly at the ambassador, her expression serious but not hostile. "We hunt pirates who prey on trade routes. We hunt slavers who steal children from their families. We hunt those who would destroy planets for profit." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Do you do any of these things, Ambassador Koth?" "Of course not," he replied stiffly. "Then you are not prey," Nari said simply. "You are potential pack members. The question is whether you choose cooperation or competition." The demonstration that followed changed everything. On screens throughout the chamber, the Council watched as human-predator alliance fleets moved through previously lawless sectors of space. Pirate strongholds that had existed for decades were dismantled in hours. Slave markets that had operated openly were shut down permanently. But it was not just the military success that impressed the observers. It was the surgical precision with which the operations were conducted. Civilians were protected, infrastructure was preserved, and captured criminals were turned over to proper authorities rather than simply eliminated. "This is not conquest," observed the Altarian minister with surprise. "This is law enforcement." "It is pack behavior," corrected Dr. Park. "They are establishing safe territory for all pack members, which now includes any species that chooses peaceful cooperation." Over the following months, the invitation became clear: join the new pack order, or become irrelevant to galactic politics. It was not a threat exactly, but it was an acknowledgement of new realities. Species after species began requesting human diplomatic missions. Trade agreements were renegotiated to include predator participation. Even the most stubborn isolationist cultures began reconsidering their positions. The transformation culminated in the establishment of the first interspecies predator academy on a neutral world near the galactic core. Nari, now 12 years old, served as the first director of cultural integration. "Students will learn not just tactics and strategy," she explained to the gathered media, "but how to understand the pack dynamics of different species, how to see potential allies instead of automatic enemies, how to build cooperation across biological and cultural differences." Standing beside her were instructors from every allied predator species, ready to teach the next generation of galactic citizens that strength came not from individual dominance, but from collective cooperation. The graduation ceremony for the first class drew representatives from across known space. As young beings from dozens of species demonstrated coordinated tactics that would have been impossible under the old competitive model, the audience began to understand what they were witnessing. "The galaxy is changing," Nari addressed the crowd in her closing speech. "Predators and prey, hunters and farmers, warriors and traders. These old categories do not matter anymore. What matters is whether we choose to build something together or tear each other apart separately." She gestured to the mixed groups of graduates, humans and aliens working together with seamless coordination. "The pack is growing, and there is room for everyone who wants to help make the galaxy safer for all our children." Grex approached the podium as Nari finished speaking. The massive Vorthaki looked out over the crowd of mixed species, his yellow eyes reflecting satisfaction and pride. "Small Alpha teaches greatest hunting truth," he announced in his powerful voice. "Strongest pack is diverse pack. Many skills, many perspectives, many types of strength." He paused, then added with unmistakable warning, "But pack protects all members. Those who threaten pack members will face full strength of united hunters." The message was clear to everyone present. The galaxy's apex predators were no longer competing with each other. They were working together, and they considered peaceful species to be under their protection. In the years that followed, piracy rates dropped to historic lows. Slavery became nearly impossible to maintain. Border conflicts were resolved through mediation rather than warfare. The Predator Alliance did not rule the galaxy, but they made it clear that certain behaviors would not be tolerated. And at the center of it all was Nari Kim, the lost human child who had grown up to become the bridge between species that had never imagined cooperation was possible. On her 15th birthday, she stood on the observation deck of the academy, looking out at the stars. Pip, now fully grown but still her closest Vorthaki friend, stood beside her. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your pod had not crashed on our world?" he asked in perfect galactic standard. Nari smiled, touching the faded pack markings on her arm that she had never allowed to be completely removed. "I think I would have grown up to be a normal human diplomat, trying to negotiate treaties between species that barely trusted each other. And now? Now I get to watch those species become family," she replied. "The pack is not just Vorthaki anymore. Pip, it is everyone who chooses cooperation over conflict." Behind them, the academy buzzed with activity as students from dozens of species trained together, learned together, and prepared to spread the new pack mentality to every corner of the galaxy. The human youngling, who had once been lost in predator territory, had found her way home at last. But home was no longer just one planet or one species. Home was wherever the pack gathered, and the pack now included anyone brave enough to see the universe through the eyes of cooperation rather than competition. In the end, the predators had not conquered the galaxy. They had simply shown everyone else what it meant to be part of something larger than themselves, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The final entry in Nari's personal journal that night read, "The hunt continues, but now we hunt for peace, for justice, and for a future where no child has to be afraid of being different. The pack is strong, the pack is diverse, and the pack takes care of its own. Always." Far across the galaxy on hundreds of worlds, former enemies worked side by side, protected by the knowledge that they were part of something greater. The age of isolated competition was ending, and the age of cooperative strength had begun. All because one lost human child had refused to see monsters where others saw only fear, and had taught the galaxy's greatest predators that the strongest hunters were those who chose to protect rather than destroy.